We just watched Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Episode 3. What are your thoughts?
I thought that episode 3 was significantly worse than 1 and 2. For a couple of reasons that we'll get into later. But the biggest one is this show is being let down by the writing. So, for reasons that will be explained, this episode is a 5 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I'm not too far off your rating there. I would give it a 6, and the word I would use to describe this episode is goofy. And we'll talk about why in a minute, but yeah, so 5 from you, 6 from me.
It's all not right. Looking good.
Let's talk about why we're so low on this one. So I'll let you lead things off. What was the weakest aspect, in your opinion?
I think the weakest aspect came closer to the end of the episode with Arondir's storyline. The action sequence was dreadfully horrible. They're captured by the orcs and working in some sort of essentially what is like a mining, like forced to mine these tunnels. And Arondir and his crew, like, they allude to hatching a plan, but they never actually show them planning anything. And then all of a sudden, I think they wanted to escape when the sunlight was at its highest, but there was no indication whether it had been more sunny that day previous to the other times we had seen them. And so they just start breaking out, right? And in the action scene, the way they decided to go with they went super stylized with it. Like, they're whipping chains with their legs. I think at one point Arondir flies sideways in a spin and stabs an orc in the neck with a branch, and it murks him. And then there's another part where he all of a sudden leaps 12 feet in the air and chops down their coverage, the orcs' coverage from the sun. And just the way it looked was it was goofy. It really looked unreal.
And let's not forget about the warg that they brought in.
Oh yeah, they brought in a warg, and it was a callback. It felt like one of those moments where they're like, "You remember this, right?" And the warg comes up to the screen, and it looks straight up like Ugly Sonic from Chip and Dale. It looked horrible. And he fights that thing, and I guess
he fights it by trapping it under the roots of a tree.
But with no plan to actually be able to kill it. Wrap the chain around its neck and do anything like that. He just traps it, and while his homies are getting destroyed, and then they eventually try to make their escape, and they do almost a visual callback to Boromir dying in Fellowship of the Ring, with the Watch Warden getting shot with the arrows. It just felt like that scene to me, and then Arondir gets pulled back down, so all of it was for nothing, which is not a fault of the episode. That's just story, how stories can be written. It's just unfortunate that the visuals were very poor.
The visuals and
the plan,
the choreography, and the build-up were all just
very weak.
Well below average.
Yeah.
For what the show should be striving for.
I think you said it felt very high-budget CW action.
Yeah. Yeah, it really did. Where it was oh, we didn't have an action scene yet? All right, let's get an action scene. And I got very big CW vibes from it, which is unfortunate because the production quality is much higher than what CW normally puts out, but it didn't show in this episode.
Yeah, so that was the most egregious thing for us. We lost almost all interest at that point. But other moments that came across as goofy were...
well, for me, the horse ride, which is a very short scene and inconsequential, really, but we just saw Galadriel just absolutely ecstatic to be riding this horse, and this horse, it's a horse, but it looked a little goofy as well, just the way they
the tongue hanging out of its mouth and
big eyes and just just goofy. And then it felt like we were supposed to be getting some catharsis out of that scene.
Yeah, some
the
sort
way
of payoff.
Galadriel was reacting. She was like so happy and like smiling and almost laughing out loud in like a happy way. But I don't remember horses being any part of her character. So it felt really out of nowhere.
And it's not like they don't have horses in Middle Earth. You know, that seemed kind of weird to me as well.
Yeah, and then I will say the Numenor plot line, it was expected that the Numenorians would come into the story, but I liked, what I saw from that bit. But the other storyline they focused on was the Stranger and the Harfoots, specifically Nori. And that got a little weird because out of nowhere, the Harfoots were just cutthroat, leaving people behind to die. And we had no foreshadowing of that, no indication that that's how the Harfoots were set up. All we heard was that like they migrate from one place to another.
And that being off the trail is not good because you could get lost. It wasn't that you go against what we believe, you're out of here, like, immediately. Or you slightly stray from the safety of the group, you're out of here. There was no indication about that.
And they said, like, no one walks alone. No one goes off trail and no one walks alone. So that sounds like, oh, we stick together, we look out for each other.
Through thick and thin.
But no, it turns out what that meant was if you go off trail, if you walk alone,
you die.
Goodbye.
Yeah, you're dead to them. You're written in their book of...
Well, I don't even know, memorial book almost. And you're remembered, but they don't give a care if you survive or not.
No. We kind of started all over the place there, but let's do a quick summary of what happened in the episode. So we had Galadriel get picked up by a ship who turned out to be Numenorians, who live in their own island and their own cities. It turns out that they were quote-unquote gifted this by the elves after the War of the First Age. Numenorians don't see it that way, but that's Galadriel's perspective as an elf. Then we also have, I believe it's just Arondir's story of being captured by the orcs and having to work as a slave. And the Harfoots with Nori, the Stranger, and the Stranger being introduced to the group and what that means.
So one thing they were missing, in our opinion, was no dwarves and no Elrond this episode, which was a notable omission because, as we said last time, those were our favorite parts of episode 2.
Yeah, some of the strongest writing was with Elrond and Durin in episode 2. And yeah, like, it was noticeable that the writing style and quality just took a dip. And then also, I think just some story decisions they're rehashing things that we've definitely seen, and I was hoping they would go their own direction.
And the most blatant example of this is Halbrand is apparently, potentially, a southern king.
But he's the reluctant king, much like Aragorn was in the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah, which we kind of predicted last time. We said, we really hope this isn't the case, but it looks like they're setting up Halbrand to be some kind of important bloodline person. And lo and behold, he's a king. And it's like, we've got like 5 kings already in this show. We don't need another one. And here we are. Not to mention, he seems a bit overpowered.
Yeah, they need to nerf Halbrand. There was that scene where he's in the market and he chums it up with those guys, and then they get into the back alley, and I'm like, right away, they're going to fight, and he's going to smack him up. What happens? He absolutely destroys like 5 guys in the back alley, and almost walks away like it was no problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also, he's got all the traits of just like an OP character, being able to steal a full-size sword off of I think it's Elandir or Elendil.
Elendil.
Elendil, off of his belt, in front of the guards. No one sees it. He hands it to Galadriel, in full sight of the guards, and they don't say anything. And she somehow just like tucks it up her sleeve. That was just nonsense to me. Yeah, they nerf Halbrand, and then on top of that, he's the king.
Yeah.
Or is allegedly going to be a king.
So a few other things. Well, there's the potential for a twist still, because the only reason Galadriel knows, quote unquote, that he's a king is the symbol he wears around his neck. But in my opinion, they made it pretty obvious that they're going to move forward with the king plotline.
They tried to play it off like he could have stole. Like he said that, oh, I found it off of someone's body, but then that misdirect was quickly shot down, like in the next sentence, which leads us into one of the bigger things for us as for the show as a whole, which is all of the mysteries and all of those, all the mysteries that make you want to keep watching and speculating were resolved within like minutes of being presented. One of the ones that got resolved like almost immediately was the king one, and then when they were in the Tower of Lore or the Hall of Lore, they were like, oh, what is this symbol? They find the symbol of, I think it was Morgoth or Sauron. Yeah, the symbol of Sauron, which Galadriel had been searching for in the last, or at least in the first episode. She's like, oh, what could it mean? And then I was thinking like, oh, they're going to leave it like they're going to keep reading these scrolls. No, they find out, oh, it's the mountain range. And then that leads into, you remember this, Mount Doom. Don't you guys remember the mountain, the volcano that they had to put the ring in? It just was so on the nose and then like just really quick.
So what I found, again, goofy about that reveal too, on top of the fact that like the symbol was a map of a mountain range, which is like kind of so-so, and they found out right away as soon as they're like, oh, there's a Hall of Lore, let me look up this symbol. Oh, there it is, we found it. Was in the pilot episode, that symbol was carved into the skin of Galadriel's brother. And they said, oh yeah, this is a map that tells us about the plan of Sauron. And it's like, why would you carve a map into your enemy's dead body
with your master plan
and then leave it for the enemy to find and then
look into it,
carve it everywhere you go? Like that, it just didn't make any sense to me. So it seemed a little goofy. And a few other things was the Adar reveal. So
the namesake of the episode.
Yeah, the orcs were like, Adar. And we were like, what does that mean? Is it a person? And then the next scene was like, the Watchwarden was like, oh, we keep hearing them say Adar. Maybe it's another name for Sauron. And then we're like, oh, that could be interesting. And then next thing you know, it's not Sauron. It's just some random person who they didn't reveal. We think could be the mouth of Sauron, but we're not
That's
so sure.
Our like long shot speculation. Another one that I thought would be somewhat likely would be an Uruk-hai.
Yeah.
But it also could just be a human siding with the orcs.
It could be. And could be probably definitely revealed next episode, because they have not been keeping us in suspense about many things. The only one they're going to keep us in suspense about is the Stranger.
The Stranger and when are the rings getting forged? Those are the two that they're going to keep on the string, keeping us moving forward. Before we get back into the Stranger, I do want to mention some of the things that we thought worked well. Numenor looked awesome.
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind when it's like positives of the episode. Specifically, the architecture style of Numenor was a nice callback or reference to the Fellowship of the Ring, where they're going down the river, and there's those two giant statues of a man pointing like across the river. It was very, very similar to that. And then on top of that, very similar to Minas Tirith from the trilogy. So looked very, very impressive when we saw it, and I thought it was really cool. And I also liked the style of clothing from the Numenorians, and their ships looked pretty cool. So that was all very good. But again, that was all in the production and not the writing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have yet to see it from the writing, but the production, like that set was just really, really cool. And I will say the character of Elendil seems like he could be good as a character. Isildur, not sure about yet.
You bring up Isildur. It's kind of important that we talk about him, because this character, who's the son of Elendil, he is going to be very important for the saga of the Rings of Power, especially going into the war with Sauron, because he is the one who was supposed to cast the One Ring into Mount Doom, and he failed, leading us into the events of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. What you kept mentioning something about the sword. You thought they were going to show a forging of some sort of sword, or...
Yeah, so the sword I'm talking about is, I believe the original name was Narsil, and it's the... Well, a bit late, but spoiler for potentially what's going to happen in the show. This is all based on the lore of the books and the trilogy and all that, but Narsil is the sword that cuts off the hand of Sauron and lets Isildur take the One Ring all the way to the top of Mount Doom. Obviously, he doesn't cast it into the fire. But then that same sword is later reforged into what is called the Flame of the West. I forget the elven name for it, but that would be the sword that Aragorn wields in the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
And Aragorn, he's Isildur's heir, correct?
Yes. Yeah, the Dunedain are descendants of Numenorians, and that is what Aragorn is a Dunedain king, I suppose. So lots of lore going on, which is, pretty cool, and that's what gets me excited when I think about the show, is like there's so many possibilities, so much lore, so much depth to this world, but then we watch the episode...
And the writing just can't match it.
But it's gonna keep sucking me back in, and I will say, like... a 5 or a 6 for Lord of the Rings of Power, it's still great entertainment. We just think it has that much room to improve.
Yeah, and I think I'm very picky with the shows I choose to watch. So when an episode is a little more lackluster, then it makes me look down upon it a bit more, because, I'm spending my time watching very specific things, and I'm not going to waste it watching 24 episodes of network TV. I want to be entertained by high quality TV.
Yeah.
So
going back to the sword, though, what I thought could be happening, this is a bit of a low chance prediction.
It's out there.
Is how Halbrand went to a blacksmith to try to, become a blacksmith, basically, so he could settle down with the Numenorians and
get a job and live there.
Start a new life, yeah. And the fact that he chose blacksmithing made me think, well, maybe he's going to be the one to forge Narsil for Isildur. So that's my out there prediction. The more I think about it, the less likely I think it is. But, I mean, he's a master thief, a master fighter, a master everything. So who's to say he's not a master...
blacksmith with magic?
Yeah, but I think in the lore, it's a different character, probably an elf that forges it. So again, not likely. But if they were going to change anything, that could be it.
I'm not as well versed in the Middle-earth lore, but my thoughts were that as the show goes on and they bring characters together, it could be that Celebrimbor ends up forging the sword. I could be totally off with that, but that would be a neat way to get everyone in one spot.
Yeah, and there will be a unification of all these characters at some point, but the only ones I know of so far that will be united would be obviously Isildur and Elrond and Elendil and Gil-galad. So looking forward to that, because Elrond and Elendil are not my favorite characters, but characters that I think have a decent amount of potential.
And they're decently well written.
Yeah, so seeing them, share scenes together, that's something I'm going to look forward to.
What would be nice as well is in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you had Legolas and Gimli. They, dwarves and elves didn't get along, and it was quite a good dynamic. You could have it where Elrond and Elendil have that kind of back and forth a little bit, or maybe he ends up doing that with Galadriel, but I think having some type of banter or something like that between the characters bouncing off each other could be good. I guess Elrond does have that with Durin, so they are kind of covering that, but it's just a potential a good combination.
Mm-hmm. And that whole dwarves and elves not getting along reminds me of another thing, a thread that will be picked up on in the next episode, is that Numenor has this almost vendetta against the elves, where they didn't even want Galadriel to step foot on the shore. So we're going to find out why that is, presumably in the next couple episodes. And another thread involved with that is there's a king.
I think it's not so much a king, but the father of the current queen.
Okay, so not a ruling king, but, someone who's in the royal family, I guess.
Yeah, off screen, she goes to talk to him, and I think that's one of the mysteries that they left unresolved in this episode, was why is she going to talk to him, and who is he?
Yeah.
Let's go back to the stranger. How long do you think they're going to drag that out?
All season. That's the season-ending twist, in my opinion, is the stranger turns out to be evil. I have seen no indication that they're going to twist it a different way, so it's got to be that. What's interesting, too, is the stranger in episode 2, I suppose, was very uncivilized and could barely talk. He had a rapid progression in this episode where he was almost stringing together sentences and wasn't so crazy, as from what I remember. And so it's going to be not too long before he's basically properly civilized. They might even have a makeover scene where he washes his hair and gets a different set of clothes and suddenly becomes all regal looking. So waiting for that to happen. But in this episode anyways, he is helping out the Harfoot, well, not the Harfoots, Nori.
The Brandyfoots.
The Brandyfoots to carry their cart. Or push their cart.
And that was at the very end of the episode. The biggest thing with the stranger was that the entire Harfoot community saw him and know who he is. And one thing I thought was quite nice was Poppy. It's Poppy, right? Poppy doesn't trust the stranger. And it's not just he's magic, we should trust him or something. She recognizes that, there's something weird about him, something dark.
Yeah, which Poppy, by the way, has, over the course of the 3 episodes, gotten, I think, not better and better, but...
with the more screen time.
Yeah, has become more interesting to see, which is always good when you see more of a character and you like them more. So that's a good sign moving forward. Nori has kind of stayed the same for me, but Poppy, I think, is... Hopefully they keep her around in the story.
I think a big reason why Poppy is... done a little bit better is because her characterization is done through her actions and when she talks, whereas Nori, they continued in this episode to have other characters say things about her so that we know what she's about instead of her actions driving our own thoughts and projecting them onto her.
Mm-hmm. I think it was the parents in this episode who said a thing about Nori, and it was no, that's not who Nori is, or Nori's this way, and it was oh, there they go again, characterizing Nori, just like they have been since the start of the show. Another scene that I liked was Nori and Poppy when they were trying to get that piece of paper out of the book.
Go left! Oh, no, we'll go left straight away.
Yes, I thought that was a cutesy little scene that worked well. So, another positive about the show, or this episode specifically.
Yeah, I think certain parts of the show are coming together a bit better with time. Harfoot's, the Numenorians in general were pretty good. I think there's a lot of room for Isildur to grow as a character. I mean, we didn't get much of him, but it wasn't the strongest. What's your take on the sister getting into the Builders Guild?
It was so out of nowhere, I don't even know where to begin.
Do you think that's going to lead anywhere at all, or is it more of a drive to get Isildur to commit to one of the disciplines of the Numenorians?
I honestly have no idea, because it was so, like I said, just out of nowhere. The only thing I can think of that, ties into what's been going on so far in the episodes is that the sister is going to end up helping Elrond build that giant forging tower.
Oh.
Because that's the only thing that's being built.
I wouldn't hate that.
Yeah, it could be interesting. It just depends how they handle it. As with most things, it's the execution, not the idea. So the idea is not crazy, it could be good. Those characters are going to become share scenes together eventually, so that could be something. But yeah, I do want to see more of Isildur in the next episode, considering what we know in the lore about how important he becomes to this story. I just like to see something, because I didn't get many strong characteristics out of the scenes that he had.
No, I think that they're kind of playing it as he's young and doesn't really know what he wants to do, but that's been a bit played out in other media. I would like them to kind of give him more of a direction and make him a strong character.
Yeah, we got the classic, someone else fails, and so the main character steps in and saves the day with the sailing bit, where the one character let the rope go, and then Isildur came in and put the rope back in. And I thought that was just
We've seen that scene so many times in other things.
Yeah.
Played out.
And
I think that's just generally, all of, the... you can't really call it filler, but it feels more like...
They're checking off boxes?
They're checking off boxes of, story structure. And it comes off as just generic at certain points. So I guess that kind of covers everything in the episode, right?
One last bit of plot stuff we haven't mentioned is it goes back to the orcs, because we really didn't like those scenes, so we haven't talked about them much. But they are apparently looking for something, and I assumed it was the shattered blade of Sauron that the kid found in episode 2.
It still could be, because he took it from the spot that it was at, and they are apparently digging through the entire Southlands.
Yeah, and somehow the elves didn't notice their giant tunnel and path of destruction in the Southlands.
Yeah, they had
so
that watchtower that can oversee the entire land, but they didn't see a big operation going on. Regardless of if they saw orcs or not, they didn't see any.
And they didn't notice a whole slave population be taken from the villages that they're supposedly protecting, a big enough workforce to dig these tunnels.
They could have played it up in the first, I think it was the first episode that we saw Arondir on the watch, where he's at the tavern and someone says, I know they mentioned the poison animals, but I don't remember them mentioning anything of, so-and-so went missing a few days ago or something, It
could have even been they always get lost, they'll return eventually, but when you look back...
play into it.
No. And then the poisoning... Why was that animal poisoned? That wasn't explained.
I think it's because of the orcs, and I don't know if the land being bogland is because of the orcs, but I presume that's why.
And that's a frustrating thing in a show when you have to kind of make up a headcanon to explain certain things. So there's time for it to be explained, but that cow that they brought in Arondir was where did this thing get poisoned at? And they gave the name of the village, and that's how they found out the orcs were digging. Why was it poisoned? and what poisoned it. That if they're just looking for something, they don't have to poison the land unless it's a general statement on wherever the orcs go, they poison everything they touch.
I think it's that, but it wasn't conveyed very well.
That's all headcanon right now, so it could be true, but it needs to be at least hinted at, and it really wasn't. So, yeah, any other notes from this episode or things you're looking forward to in the next episode?
Things that I'd like to see in the next episode is more Elrond and Durin. I would like them to touch back on that. I would like to see them continue the good portions of Elendil. That's how you say it?
Elendil is how I say it.
Elendil, and maybe give Galadriel... I don't know if it's... There's something off with... I think it might be the lines that the actor is being given, but I would like them to make her a little bit more likable. Something that I can grasp. To be like, oh, I want to see more Galadriel plotline. She's driven to the point that it's like almost annoying to me. So I want them to make her pair up with a character so that she bounces off them better, rather than just being like trying to do her own thing, like strong-willed. So I'd like to see that. I would like to see where... I am interested in where Arondir's story goes, but I hope it's not as goofy as this episode. And then, I am excited to see where the Harfoots end up. Maybe they end up in the Shire. Who knows?
Yeah, so... Yeah, a couple things I'd be looking forward to is mostly the same as you, right? Like more Durin and Elrond. Galadriel, I'm glad they gave her companions. I think that has kind of shored up the biggest problem I had with the pilot with Galadriel, is she seemed to kind of be doing her own thing and, like you said, really driven. But these other characters kind of temper that. At least so far, that's been what I've noticed. I think what they could do... Again, spitball in here like we do. Give her a scene where she helps another character. So you see that she's not just driven because her brother died. She's driven because she wants to help people and prevent evil. Something like that. Right? So showing that through an action she does, whether it's in Numenor or if she goes to the Southlands, that could be an interesting way of just giving her more to work with. Because so far it's like, I want to cast evil away from the lands and defeat Sauron and avenge my brother. And like, that's nice. And it looks good on paper. But it doesn't give her much when she has to talk with other characters or go to new places. It just, it's very one-dimensional. So giving her some, like a B plot where something else happens unrelated to Sauron and her goal that gives her a more well-rounded character, that's something I think we could see in an upcoming episode that would be, a step in the right direction.
I think that's also something that maybe why we latched onto the Elrond story a bit more, is because it's not just trying to get to the Sauron Rings of Power thing. Like, yes, he is working with Durin to build the tower, but they're taking their time. It seems like they're trying to set up the characters more and not just, get to the title of the show. That's what I want to see more of. I want to see them be in this world, use the set mythology and lore to, make it more interesting, like show things here and there or allude to them more and then build on them. And take their time with the setting and like build up the characters, because right now with some of the plots, they don't seem like they're going anywhere. Like the Arondir one, it's going somewhere obviously, but it's taking its time, but it's not one that should take a lot of time. Whereas when you have discussion scenes with Elrond and Durin, it reminds me of House of the Dragon. You don't really care what happens, eventually. The dialogue is very interesting, so you watch it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would like them to focus more on.
Yeah, just like a general observation is kind of like the plot is what makes it exciting, like the lore and where it could eventually be going, right? Like every time we talk about like Celebrimbor building the tower, that's exciting. We're waiting for that to happen, or the Harfoots finding out who the stranger is. That's exciting. But what makes the show good is how they get there and the relationships between the characters as they get to those plot points. And so the show's been very exciting so far, but it hasn't been very good because they just haven't built those relationships and the characterizations and had those like the explorations of character so much as an exploration of the plot.
Yeah. It reminds what you just said kind of reminds me of like Avatar: The Last Airbender. Their goal is to take down the Fire Lord, but there's so much that happens in between, and that's why you love watching it.
Yeah. So, again, looking forward to episode 4. More of that. More exploring the characters, the setting, rather than just getting events going that drive the plot.
And this is another thing with the show is I like talking about it, I like thinking about it, but watching it might be the least interesting portion of it.
Which is too bad. But
it's got a lot of potential, and that's why we're so critical of it.
But it's the 3rd episode of a multi-season story that a lot has been invested in. So, like we said, lots of potential, lots of room to grow. Very exciting, and we're excited for episode 4. We're just nervous because we just want it to be good. And there's more and more elements that have been,
intriguing,
and that show signs of improvement, but they need to put it together, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later. But even if it's by the end of the season and then it gives me confidence for season 2, I'd be happy with that at this point.
Yeah, like even if season 1 ends up being middle of the road, they can only go up from here if they listen to the right criticism of the show. Season 2 could put everything like we're talking about, they could put that together. And I'm looking forward to where we go from here. With that being said, I think that wraps up our review and discussion of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Episode 3. And, if you liked our discussion, you want to hear more, just drop a like, hit the subscribe button, and leave us some comments. We love to see when people point out things that we might have missed. We'll discuss this on the next House of the Dragon episode. But, some of the comments have been really insightful. So if you have anything you'd like to point out, we'll be in the comment section to respond to you. We'll respond in our next video as well. So, drop a comment, drop a like, subscribe. We'll keep making more. Rylan, any thoughts here?
No, just like you said, comment things that we missed. If it's especially lore related, we like to learn the lore. We're learning as we go. And, the more we know, the more exciting this show becomes. So if it's, lore related, definitely let us know. Helps make our discussions better, helps us learn, and just we find it really interesting. So
thanks for watching and or listening. These were just our thoughts. See you next time.